Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere dry. Really dry. Imagine you're standing in the middle of the Persian plateau, around 500 BCE. Your sandals are coated in fine yellow dust. The sun is a white coin pinned in the sky, and not even the lizards are moving. The heat doesn't just touch your skin, it presses on you, like you owe it money. You probably won't survive this without water, shelter, and some very clever engineering. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far the sleepy little history club reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking slowly across ancient Persia. There's no air conditioning unit humming in the background, no button to push. No cool setting, just you, your robes, and the dry rattle of wind pulling across sun-cracked earth. But here's the surprise. These people figured out how to chill, literally. They didn't just cope with the heat, they outsmarted it. You pass a caravan of merchants, their camels looking as bored as you feel. The men shade their faces with wide turbans, but beneath all that cloth is sweat, soaked into linen, pouring from brows. Everyone is sticky, even the silk-robed nobles riding on elaborately cushioned platforms. But you notice something strange as you approach a settlement. The buildings are tall, many with narrow slits or towers stretching toward the sky. The air shifts as you near them. It's subtle at first, just the faintest movement, like someone exhaling across your cheek. Welcome to the outer edge of the Achaemenid Empire. Massive, powerful, and hot as the inside of a pottery kiln. This empire, with its intricate road systems, grand palaces, and multilingual administration, also harbored an obsession with controlling the elements. They had to. You can't rule a quarter of the known world if half your army faints from heatstroke. You find yourself tramping toward a hilltop structure. Even from afar, it looks deliberate, angled not just for the view, but for the wind. Inside, you'll find stone floors, thick walls, and interior courtyards drenched in shadow. This wasn't just an aesthetic choice. It was physics, baked into brick. Historians still argue whether the Persians adapted these ideas from earlier Elamite settlements, or if this innovation was entirely their own. Either way, they ran with it. A local boy waves you toward a shaded bench near a cistern. You sit. It's cooler here. Not by much, but enough to notice. You peel off your outer robe. It's damp and smells like dust and dried sweat, but it did its job, trapping some of the heat before it hit your skin. You're handed a small clay cup. It's filled with lukewarm barley water. Nothing glamorous, but it's hydrating. As you sip, you watch the wind teasing the edges of hanging cloth draped above narrow alleys. These alleyways are designed to funnel air like a city-sized wind tunnel. Not that they'd explain it in those words, but they knew. You see, the streets here don't just connect. They guide, channel, and sometimes even trap the breeze. There's no fan, no ice, no metal vents, just earth, fabric, water, and gravity. A breeze snakes its way down the corridor, lifting your hair just slightly. You lean into it instinctively. Your whole body feels like a thirsty sponge. Nearby, a merchant argues with a craftsman about the correct placement of a windcatcher. Apparently, it's not catching enough wind. The craftsman shrugs and gestures toward the sun's position. It's all about timing, he insists. Wait until twilight. Already, you begin to understand something subtle but profound. To survive in this land meant tuning your life to nature's rhythms. The Persians didn't overpower their climate. They listened to it, studied it, worked with it. Now, the sun is lowering just slightly, casting longer shadows. You notice that more people are beginning to emerge, slowly, cautiously, from behind thick curtains and stone walls. The city breathes again in the fading heat. You lie back, listening to the muted bustle, your skin no longer sizzling. The soft scrape of sandals on stone, the gurgle of water in a distant basin, the flap of a fabric awning tugging at its rope. These are the sounds of a civilization that turned heat into a problem it could gently outweed. And you're just getting started. There's a lot more cooling genius to come. But for now, stay where you are. Let the warmth sink into your bones and imagine that soon, you'll be stepping into the inner sanctum of an empire that built palaces not to impress, but to survive the scorch. You're still lounging near that cistern, soaking in the early signs of relief as the day's heat begins to wane. The barley water is gone, but a light breeze still tickles the edges of your robe. You rise slow and creaky like a wooden cart and make your way toward the heart of a royal city, Persepolis. Now, don't expect a bustling metropolis like modern Tehran. Instead, picture an expanse of elegantly spaced structures, columns like stone reeds rising from the earth, and carvings that look like they've never known weathering, though they most certainly have. The whole place is a statement, not just of power, but of environmental intelligence. As you approach one of the main palaces, maybe Apadana, built by Darius the Great, you step beneath towering stone lintels. The drop in temperature is immediate. It's not freezing, but it's definitely cooler than outside. You run your fingers along the carved reliefs, lions, lotus flowers, soldiers in procession. But what's really striking isn't what you see, it's what you feel. The architecture is doing something. These stone structures aren't just fancy boxes for ceremonies. Their massive walls are thick enough to keep heat out during the day and release warmth at night. High ceilings allow the hot air to rise, lifting it, metaphorically and literally, out of your face. There are no windows in the way we think of them. Instead, openings are small, strategic, and shaded. You're inside, but the air moves. Barely. Just enough. That's the trick. Historians still argue whether the Achaemenids intentionally designed these spaces for thermal regulation or whether the cooling effect was a side benefit of defensive architecture. But here's a sleepy little secret. You don't carve entire palaces from limestone and orient your doorways perfectly by accident. These builders knew what they were doing. There's even evidence, faint but tantalizing, that rooms were arranged in specific sequences based on time of day and temperature. Think of it like a natural thermostat, except you don't touch a dial, you just walk to a different room. You wander deeper. The air gets quieter, thicker, but not unpleasant. You begin to notice how many corners are rounded rather than harsh, how the symmetry of the space makes everything feel balanced. There's no draft, but there's no staleness either. Somehow the building breathes. You pass what looks like a sunken area, possibly a throne room or reception space. It's partially shaded by an overhanging portico. Beneath your feet, the stone has a slight shine to it, smoothed over centuries by sandals and ceremonies. You stand where satraps once knelt, where tribute from across the empire was presented to kings in a dozen different languages. But you're more interested in the acoustics. Whisper, and it travels. Shout, and it vanishes into stone. Temperature here is also a matter of sound. Loud places often feel hotter, don't they? Here, even noise is cooled. A local architect passing by sees you staring at the walls and chuckles soft. He explains, half in jest, half in pride, that the palace was designed by the wind, not the king. The wind, he claims, told the builders where it liked to run, and they just followed its path. You believe him. As the shadows grow longer, you notice servants hanging damp cloths across stone archways. Not to clean. No, these are ancient air filters. When the wind blows through, the moisture evaporates, taking a little heat with it. It's simple, brilliant, and it smells faintly of rose and citrus, like someone mixed practical magic with an ancient perfume recipe. You wander toward a corner chamber, lower and more enclosed than the rest. It's noticeably cooler, even as the evening air turns pleasant outside. This was likely a resting space, perhaps for royal scribes, perhaps for minor nobles, perhaps for someone who needed to cool down before saying something important. Because no one makes wise decisions when they're sweating through their tunic. A cat slinks across your path, barely glancing at you. Even it seems cooler here. You sit again, this time on a carved stone bench, and rest your head against a wall that's been holding back the sun all day. The stone is cool, shockingly so. It's the kind of relief that goes beyond skin, straight to your bones. Like the building itself is saying, you made it. You're safe. You can breathe now. And you do. The Persians weren't just empire builders. They were environmental poets. Their architecture wasn't an afterthought. It was a philosophy. They built coolness into their cities, made shade a strategy, and turned thick walls into partners against a brutal climate. As the stars begin to prick the sky above Persepolis, you lie there, eyes half closed, marveling not at the grandeur of the place, but at how it knew what you needed before you even did. You wake with a little jolt, not from noise, but from silence. The kind of dense, pillow-soft hush that only arrives in the late desert night. The stars above are sharp, almost arrogant, and the wind is starting to stir. Not wildly, just enough to lift the edges of a tunic. Or if you're lucky, to snake its way down a windcatcher. Ah yes, the windcatcher. Now you're in Yazd, a city that feels like it was designed by whispers. You walk narrow alleys, flanked by beige mud brick walls, all of them blending into the same sleepy shade of caramel. But there's something odd above the skyline, strange chimneys with slits in their sides, like watchful eyes turned skyward. These are the badgers, or windcatchers, and they're about to show you the coolest trick in the Persian playbook. You enter a traditional courtyard house, greeted by the smell of old brick and cool stone. A cup of sweetened mint tea is pressed into your hand. It's lukewarm, intentionally, so the body doesn't rebel. The host gestures upward. You follow his gaze. A rectangular tower rises above the building. It's not just for decoration. The slits at the top, are positioned to catch even the faintest breath of wind. But they don't just trap it, they direct it downward into the very bones of the home. You feel it almost immediately, a slow, steady drift of air descending like an invisible hand. And it's cooler than you expect. Not crisp like an autumn breeze, but definitely a few degrees below the outside world. Enough to make you exhale through your nose and murmur something vaguely appreciative in whatever Farsi you've picked up. Now here's the science, because it's surprisingly elegant. The tower faces the prevailing wind direction. As the air enters, it accelerates downward through the shaft. Along the way, it might pass over water channels or clay pots, further cooling it by evaporation before it finally reaches the living space. Some versions of these towers even have multiple vents. If one side isn't catching wind, another might be. And in cases where there's no breeze at all, the rising heat from the house creates a pressure difference that pulls air in anyway. That's right. These structures are smart enough to function in stillness. Nature's backup fan. Historians still argue over when and where the first windcatcher appeared. Was it in Iran, Egypt, somewhere on the Arabian Peninsula? It depends on who you ask and whether they've had their tea yet. But few dispute that Iran, especially Yazd, perfected the form. You climb a narrow staircase, stone steps worn soft by centuries of feet, and emerge on the rooftop. The tower looms above you, its openings now glowing faintly in the moonlight. You can hear the air moving through it, a soft, rhythmic rustle like a breath being drawn in, held, and released. A few rooftops over, a family is sleeping under the stars. Their mats are arranged beneath a windcatcher, and they look like they've never heard of heat. It's not luxury, it's just design that works. And there's something poetic about this, catching the wind, taming it without trapping it. Persians didn't conquer nature with machines. They invited it in, offered it a glass of rosewater, and asked it to stay a while. You sit on the roof, legs crossed, a slow smile forming as a breeze ruffles your hair. The city murmurs around you. Dogs bark far off. The door creaks. Someone yawns theatrically. But mostly it's just the wind. Always the wind. And beneath you, families are sleeping soundly, thanks to a tower that turns open air into quiet comfort. No buzzing fan. No flickering digital display. Just gravity, pressure, and good old-fashioned trial and error passed down through generations of builders who knew that the desert doesn't negotiate. You have to listen to it. You begin to imagine your own bedroom back home with one of these. Maybe a clay tower in place of your air conditioner. Your neighbor might complain. Choi might object, but you'd sleep like a sultan. For now, just let the idea float, like the breeze. Gentle, clever, and perfectly timed. You're back on the move again, but this time you're going underground. No, not to escape the law or a nosy neighbor who keeps asking if you've seen their goat, but to find one of ancient Persia's most ingenious secrets, a canat. From above, it looks like nothing, just a dusty hill with strange holes arranged in a line. They almost resemble the markings of a giant mole playing hopscotch. But you follow a local guide who hands you a lamp and says with that casual Persian shrug, you might want to duck. You descend carefully. The air grows cooler with every step. Your skin, slick with sweat just minutes ago, now tingles with relief. The tunnel is narrow, the walls damp in places, and then you hear it, the gentle gurgle of water. A sound so soothing, so absolutely unexpected in the middle of the desert that you pause just to savor it. Welcome to the world of underground aqueducts. The canat system is a marvel of ancient engineering. Horizontal wells that tap into mountain water tables and transport the cool, life-giving stream across vast, parched distances without pumps, pipes, or electricity. Just slope, gravity, and persistence. You're now walking beside a narrow channel of flowing water. The floor is uneven, carved by hand centuries ago. The walls, though rough, glisten slightly with moisture. You touch one, it's cold. And it's not just the temperature of the stone. It's the feel of an entire climate hidden below the surface. Historians still argue about the origins of qanats. Some say they were pioneered in Persia around 1000 BC. Others argue for earlier systems in Mesopotamia or even Afghanistan. But it's Persia that took the idea and ran with it, straight into cities, homes, and royal gardens. Your guide points upward. There's a shaft, one of many vertical access points used for maintenance, airflow, and ventilation. It doubles as a skylight and a chimney, letting warm air out while pulling fresh, cool air in. This wasn't just a water system. It was a cooling system, too. Some qanats were connected directly to residential basements or serdaps, underground chambers for storage or rest. The cold air passing through the tunnels would circulate gently into the home above, like having your own subterranean HVAC system run by mountains. not motors. You duck again as the ceiling dips. Your guide laughs. Apparently, taller people suffered most under Persian infrastructure, but they also slept best. You reach a small widening in the tunnel, a chamber carved out to allow people to sit or gather jugs of water. Here, there is so cool you almost forget you're still in a desert. You take a deep breath. It smells of clay, minerals, and ancient earth. It's the scent of survival. Fringe theories abound about these places. Some locals insist certain qanats were also used as emergency escape routes or as whispering galleries for secret messages. One enthusiastic storyteller once claimed a king used his qanat as a wine-chilling tunnel. You're not sure if that's history or heat stroke, but honestly, it sounds genius either way. Climbing back up is a bit more difficult. Your limbs feel lazy, like they've already started to nap. The sun above is blinding after the tunnel's shade. But as you emerge, you understand why these systems mattered. They were invisible arteries running beneath entire civilizations, quietly making life possible. You brush the dust from your robe and glance back at the small opening behind you. It's humble. You never guess at powered cities. But now when someone says Persian engineering, you won't think of gold, swords, or palaces. You'll think of this tunnel. Cool, quiet, determined. You're above ground again, blinking against the midday light. But this time, you're not in the bustling heart of the city. You're in a quiet residential neighborhood, or what would have passed for one centuries ago. Flat-roofed homes cluster around an open square, but your eyes are drawn to the round domes poking up from the earth like upside-down bowls. These, your guide tells you with a knowing smile, are bars. Think of them as ancient water banks, vast underground cisterns where cool water was stored, often for an entire neighborhood. And like everything else the ancient Persians touched, these weren't just practical. They were surprisingly poetic. You walk around the outside of one. The dome is made of thick brick and coated with a lime plaster mix that helps reflect heat. Small chimneys poke out of the top, and those are more than architectural flair. They're vent shafts that help control both airflow and pressure. You duck through a small arched entrance and step inside. Immediately, your breath catches. It's cool, properly cool, like walking into a shaded stone church after a summer hike. The air is still and heavy with the scent of water, clay, and a kind of ancient quiet. You can hear your own footsteps echo faintly against the rounded walls. Down below, accessed by a descending staircase, is the water itself, collected from qanats, rain, or carefully directed seasonal flows. The reservoir is vast and black as ink. If you lean over the edge carefully, please, you can just make out the faint shimmer of the surface. Historians still debate how early these reservoirs became a communal feature. Some say they started as private stockpiles for noble households and later evolved into shared utilities. Others argue that public bars existed from the very beginning, built alongside mosques and bazaars as part of a holistic urban plan. What no one disputes is how astonishingly effective they were. The walls are thick, sometimes more than 2 meters, and made from a special kind of mortar called saruj, which included lime, ash, clay, goat hair, and egg whites. Yes, egg whites. Turns out breakfast ingredients are good for waterproofing too. You pause at a low bench carved into the interior wall. This was a gathering spot, not just for water collection, but for news, for gossip, for kids tossing pebbles into the pool and being gently scolded by their elders. It's cool in temperature and mood, the kind of space that invites reflection, whispering, and maybe a nap. Just above, there's an opening to a courtyard. It's not large, but it's designed with precision. You begin to notice the way the surrounding walls slope just so, catching breezes and guiding them downward. The entrance aligns with the dominant wind direction of the region, allowing airflow to drift over the cistern and lower the temperature even more. Wind meets water. Water cools the air. Cooled air moves through the home, and so the entire neighborhood breathes together. These courtyards, often shaded with trees or trellises, weren't just functional. They were emotional architecture. A place to sit, sigh, stretch your toes, sip something mildly sweet, and listen to the pigeons argue over roof space. A place where air currents were treated with the same importance as prayer times. Fringe details. One 19th century traveler wrote about how certain bars were rumored to be haunted, not by ghosts, but by echoes. He said the structure's acoustics would twist whispers into something unrecognizable. Another tale says lovers used the dome's walls to pass messages, knowing the sound would carry softly, even when words couldn't. As you climb back into the sun, your skin prickles slightly, not from heat, but from leaving behind that silent, sacred pocket of comfort. You realize now that cooling wasn't just about resisting the environment. It was a way of building trust between space and person. You glance around. Every house here seems to participate in the ritual. Openings placed not for fashion, but function. Walls shaded not for style, but survival. And yet somehow the whole thing feels like art. You settle beneath a low canopy. A child runs past, barefoot and laughing, chased by a sibling wielding a wet cloth like a weapon. You smile, because yes, it's hot, but it's a heat they've learned to live with, not by suffering, but by planning. And now, you know their secret. You're reclining now, somewhere between alert and dozing, your back propped against a sun-warmed wall. A fig tree throws dappled shadows onto the courtyard tiles. You'd swear the wind knows you personally, nudging you with perfect timing, as if to say, you're not done yet. And no, you're not, because now you're about to notice something you've been leaning on all day, the walls themselves. Reach out your hand, touch that surface. It's not cold, but it's cooler than you'd expect, especially in this sun. The material is rough, textured, mud brick, or sometimes baked clay, formed with straw, sand, and whatever else could be mixed into a sort of ancient architectural smoothie. But here's the wonder. These walls aren't just standing there looking pretty. They're breathing. You're inside a home now, a modest structure, but well-built. The walls are unusually thick, and there's a faint scent of earth and heat baked together over centuries. These walls do something clever. During the day, they absorb heat very slowly, and at night, when the temperature drops, they release it just as slowly. It's like a camel's fur, but for buildings. You press your palm flat. It's not the heat that impresses you. It's the balance. No sudden change. No jolt. Just this steady exchange, hour after hour, between mud and air. It's subtle, but it works. In some homes, you notice small horizontal clay pipes embedded within the walls, part of a passive air circulation system. Warm air would rise through these and escape, drawing cooler air from below. And in the more elaborate home, they'd sometimes sprinkle water near these pipes. The breeze would pick up the moisture and the ancient swamp cooler, minus the hum. This practice wasn't just for the elite. Even ordinary builders understood that a few extra inches of clay could mean a nap without sweat. Historians still debate where this particular clay technique began. Some trace it to Mesopotamia. Others say it evolved independently in various arid regions. But Persia took it a step further, combining it with domes, cellars, and windcatchers for maximum cooling effect. As you move through the rooms, you notice that the color of the walls matters too. Lighter shades reflect heat. Certain mineral pigments added to the plaster even gave walls antimicrobial properties. Form and function, check. You duck into a side chamber. It's darker here intentionally. These were often used for food storage or during peak heat for just sitting and waiting for the sun to change its mind. One man you meet, leaning lazily in a woven chair, calls it his thinking room. Though judging by his closed eyes and soft snoring, not much thinking is happening today. You linger in the doorway, letting the contrast sink in. Outside, the sun pounds like a drum. Inside, everything is muffled, slowed, soothing. You're struck by how modern this all feels. Not in design, but in principle. Energy efficiency, thermal regulation, zero electricity, all achieved using dirt, water, and time. Even fringe materials come into play. In a few rare cases, ancient builders used bits of seashell or crushed ceramic to strengthen the mix. Some experimental homes embedded salt or ash layers to repel pests or regulate humidity. The recipe changed by region, by clan, sometimes by mood. One 19th century travel account you find amusing tells of a man who swore that adding goat milk to his bricks made the walls sing when cooled at dusk. Scientists haven't confirmed that one, but wouldn't it be something? Back in the main room, a boy is fanning his grandmother with a palm leaf. She shoos him away and points to the corner. There, a clay pot sits on a stone slab, beating slightly with condensation. You've seen them before, Zuri, traditional evaporative coolers. But the real cooling is happening all around you, in every brick, every joint, every shadow carefully shaped by generations of trial and, well, a lot of heat. You lie back again. The walls don't buzz. They don't whir, but they're working. And tonight, when the moon rises and the desert cools, they'll give back every bit of comfort they stored. Not too fast, just enough to lull you into deeper sleep. Not unlike what they're doing right now. You've spent hours soaking up the marvels of mud brick and the gentle exhale of windcatchers, but now your attention turns to something smaller, something so ordinary you nearly overlook it. A ceramic jug resting beside a doorway, its surface sweating under the dry air. You crouch down next to it, curiosity tugging at your half-drowsy mind. A local elder nods at your interest and mutters something in Farsi about nature's magic trick. You reach out. The jug's clay is coarse and cool to the touch. The water inside, somehow colder than it has any right to be. Evaporation, that's the trick. Here's how it works, and it really is brilliant in its simplicity. The jug is made of porous clay. Tiny holes you can't see with your eye allow just a bit of water to seep to the surface. There, under the dry desert breeze, that water evaporates. And in doing so, it pulls heat away from the remaining water inside. You've just stumbled across one of the oldest forms of air conditioning, evaporative cooling. It's the same principle behind your own sweat, if you think about it, except here, it's been turned into architecture, infrastructure, and daily habit. You look up from the jug and begin to notice how this principle was woven throughout Persian life. Damp curtains hung in doorways, water basins placed directly beneath the mouths of windcatchers, people lightly misting the air with rosewater before meals. It wasn't just about refreshment, it was temperature control. Historians still argue how far back this knowledge goes. Some claim the technique was borrowed from ancient Egypt, where similar vessels were used for wine and grain. Others point to even older traditions from the Indus Valley. But Persia lived by it. You walk into a small tea house, nothing fancy, just a few worn cushions and a man with an impressive beard preparing cups of dark, strong chai. Above you, thin cloth strips dangle from the ceiling. Every now and then, the owner flicks water from a ladle onto them. The ceiling drips gently. The breeze from a nearby windcatcher passes through the soaked cloth, bringing a cool, moist whisper into the room. It smells like mint, dust, and thyme. There's something deeply intimate about it. These aren't mechanical systems. They require human touch. A ladle of water, a careful placement of jars, a moment taken to wet a corner of cloth before napping. It makes comfort feel like a conversation between you and your environment. And this wasn't just for homes. Marketplaces and public squares often had water features, fountains, troughs, misting channels that did double duty. They looked nice and they cooled people down. It's why you'll often find elaborate garden layouts in Persian design, not only for beauty, but for airflow. The water didn't just sit there, it worked. In more lavish settings, you'd find ceramic pots filled with cold water and rose petals placed on windowsills. As air passed over them, the smell lifted, carried through corridors like a sleepy perfume. Some wealthy families even hung wet sheets at their entrances in summer, sometimes perfumed, sometimes not, but always damp enough to cool passing air. One fringe legend you hear over tea involves a scholar who insisted on placing a damp cloth over his scrolls during the day, not to cool the parchment, but to cool his brain while reading. Did it work? No one knows. But the scrolls survived, and so did he. You're handed a cup of tea. The owner gestures to the door and says something that roughly translates to, "Air feels better with water in it." And it does. You step outside and the breeze carries a softness now, the desert edge dulled by the craft of evaporation. There's a cleverness in this restraint. No need for ice, electricity, or even fans. Just patience, observation, and materials that know how to work with heat instead of fighting it. You close your eyes for a moment. You can hear it, the faint hiss of evaporation, the creak of stretched cloth in the breeze, a soft splash in a distant basin. These people didn't invent comfort. They inherited it from the earth, rewrote it in clay, and passed it along in cups of cool water. And tonight, lucky you get to sip it too. The sun is easing into its descent, shadows growing longer, stretching across the courtyard like sleepy cats. And you're heading down again. Not into a cannet this time, but into a chamber built for something else entirely, rest. You find the entrance tucked at the back of a traditional Persian house. A short flight of steps leads underground, into what feels like a hushed breath beneath the earth. This is the serdab, literally cold water place. But don't let the name fool you. It's not just storage. It's a survival strategy disguised as serenity. You step inside and pause. It's quiet here. Deeply, deliciously quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't just hush sound, it hushes thought. The walls are thick and cool to the touch. The air, though still, feels gentler. Your body, so recently held hostage by desert heat, begins to let go of its vigilance. This is where people would retreat during the most blistering parts of the day. Not just to survive, but to relax, to sleep, to gather. You imagine an entire family sprawled out on cushions, sipping yogurt drinks and telling stories in low, rhythmic voices. And there's more science than you might guess. These rooms were often built directly above cannats or near cisterns, so the natural coolness from water and earth would drift upward. Some had small ventilation shafts called tarkana that allowed warm air to rise and exit, drawing cooler air inward from shaded courtyards or water-cooled halls. Historians still puzzle over just how standardized the serdab was. In some regions, it's common. In others, rare. Some believe it was a status symbol, an underground luxury for the wealthy. Others say it was as essential as the front door. You sink onto a low bench. There's no breeze here, but the air is undeniably cooler, denser, like the breath of a stone cathedral. The dim light, filtered through narrow slits above, turns everything soft and golden. In the corner sits a low table with a clay pot of water and a bowl of dried fruit. Simple comforts. A hand fan rests beside them, made of woven reeds. You pick it up and wave it lazily. Even the smallest movement stirs the air. You feel a new gratitude for this space. You close your eyes and imagine it's centuries ago. A scholar reading aloud. A grandmother humming as she sorts lentils. A boy pressing his face against the floor, giggling at how cold it feels. You're not alone in your wonder. A 17th century French traveler once described these rooms as miracles beneath the earth and swore they were better than the bathhouses of Rome. French praise, perhaps. But after 5 minutes down here, you're inclined to agree. The genius of the Serdab isn't just in temperature. It's in psychology. The moment you enter, your body feels safer, slower. The world outside becomes irrelevant. Even now, in the age of AC units and refrigerated drinks, nothing quite matches the elemental luxury of lying back in a stone chamber, knowing the earth itself is cooling you. Above your head, faint noises drift down, street sounds, a vendor's call, the flap of laundry on a line. But here, it's as if someone's turned the volume down on life. You lie back on a cushion. It smells faintly of rosewater and sun. The ceiling curves above you, designed to echo softly, but not loudly enough to startle. You breathe in, cool, dry, peaceful. A theory you once read pops into your head, that the human body rests more deeply underground. Something about the stillness, the Earth's magnetic fields. Or maybe it's just that there are no interruptions down here. No wind, no insects, no light to nag your eyelids. You don't need answers. You just need time. Time to feel your heart rate slow, your thoughts untangle, your skin stop waging war against the sun. The Serdab isn't a machine. It doesn't roar to life or flicker with light. It just is. Always waiting, always cool. And right now it's yours. You eventually rise from the Serdab, blinking as the sunlight meets your face again. The air outside is cooler now. Late afternoon has cast a golden glaze across the city. Everything moves slower at this hour, like even time needs to catch its breath. You walk through a quieter part of the residential district, where ornate wooden doors bear heavy iron knockers, each with its own unique sound, by the way, depending on whether the visitor is a man or a woman. But that's another story. Your destination this time, shade. Not just any shade, royal shade. You step into the lush courtyard of a noble's estate. It's not grand in the way you might expect. There are no fountains spraying into the sky, no marble statues of peacocks. But it's elegant in its restraint. Silk canopies flutter softly above polished tile. Potted citrus trees lean lazily toward the sun, and a breeze threads its way through the pergolas. Here, shade is political. You settle under a wide awning, its cloth dyed in muted blues and reds. A servant quietly places a low tray in front of you. Cool fruit, sweet pastry, and a cup of yogurt drink with mint. The host appears a moment later, dressed in layered robes of silk, so fine they shimmer when he moves. He doesn't sit immediately. Instead, he stands beneath the canopy's center, allowing the shaded air to settle around him. Why? Because in courtly Persia, where you stood or sat, under the shade said something. This wasn't just about cooling off. Shade was a marker of proximity, a privilege. The closer you were to the center, the more honored you were. The more shade you had, the more influence you held. Some royal events even included deliberate moments where a noble was asked to stand in the sun, not because there wasn't room, but because it was a gesture of demotion. Historians still debate how codified this practice was. Was it rigid court etiquette or flexible symbolism? Did it originate in Persia? Or did it echo older customs from Assyria or India? But one thing's for sure, shade was more than comfort. It was choreography. And it makes sense. In a land where heat defines life, the ability to sit in shadow becomes power. A Persian poet once described kingship as the art of sitting where the wind arrives first. You sip your yogurt drink and think, yep, that about covers it. The host finally joins you. He fans himself with a small reed fan and gestures toward the ceiling. You notice thin slits above, vents designed to let hot air escape. Light filters through them gently, striping the floor like soft tiger patterns. The breeze, when it arrives, smells of citrus and saffron. You watch the way the courtiers interact. Slow gestures, patient speech, nods drawn out like lullabies. Everyone understands the rules. No one raises their voice. Even arguments happen in the shade. Calm, quiet, strategic. Heat is for the foolish. Coolness is for the wise. One older man adjusts the canopy ropes. He's not a servant, but a trusted advisor. Adjusting the shade is a delicate task. Too much sun, and your guest feels neglected. Too much shadow, and the host seems subservient. It's a balancing act that would terrify modern office managers. And let's talk about those canopies. They're often layered, dyed cotton below, tightly woven flax above, sometimes with a splash of animal hide to block the harshest rays. They don't just block sun, they catch breeze, soften glare, and create a kind of filtered light that makes everyone look slightly more regal than they probably are. You lean back, noticing how the entire courtyard is oriented, not randomly, but according to wind flow, sun path, and the movement of guests throughout the day. The walls are curved in subtle ways that prevent heat from pooling. Even the seating is angled just so, with marble tiles underfoot that stay cool thanks to the water channels beneath them. You'd laugh if it weren't so elegant. This isn't just shade, it's a philosophy. You're reminded of an old tale, half myth, half cautionary fable, about a visiting foreign envoy who demanded to sit in the king's seat during a shaded meeting. The Persians, ever polite, honored the request, and the man promptly fainted from heatstroke. Turns out the king's seat wasn't the one with the most shade. It was the one with the best airflow. So yes, you think as you sip again, maybe we've underestimated ancient HVAC diplomacy. Here in this courtyard, time slows. Voices lower. Even your thoughts feel more measured. That's what clever design does. It doesn't just cool your skin. It cools your mind. And as the shadows stretch longer, spilling out toward the garden, you start to understand something. The Persians didn't just invent shade structures. They elevated them into tools of governance, hierarchy, and hospitality. Not bad for a few sticks, ropes, and cloth, plus about 2,000 years of wisdom. You leave the shaded courtyard just as the evening breeze begins its slow sweep across the city. But now you're heading into the real mystery of Persian cooling, something that shouldn't exist in a desert climate at all. Yes, you heard that right. In the middle of Iran, in the middle of summer, you make your way along a dusty path that leads outside the town walls, past date palms and donkey carts, to an odd sight, a towering conical structure made of mud brick, looming silently like a frozen wave. It's not a temple, not a silo, not some misplaced spaceship. This is a yakshal, literally an ice pit. And it is one of the most genius pieces of passive refrigeration ever built. You circle it slowly. The base is wide, the dome rising in a smooth taper. There are no windows, just one small door and several vent holes high above. You step inside, and your breath catches. It's cold. Not freezer cold. Not walk-in fridge cold. But compared to the late desert air you just left, it's a startling drop. Cool enough to make your skin tighten and your breath slow. You're standing in a structure that was designed to store ice in one of the hottest climates on Earth. Without electricity, without fans, just with air, geometry, and audacity. Here's how it worked. During winter, ice was gathered from nearby mountains or created in shallow channels overnight. Those channels, carefully shaded and dug in thermal sweet spots, would freeze water in the cold desert nights. That ice was then collected and packed down deep into the yakshal's underground chamber, layered with straw or insulating earth. The dome above, that wasn't just for show. Its shape minimized surface area exposed to the sun, while the vents allowed hot air to rise and escape, creating a pressure vacuum that drew cooler air inward. Historians still argue whether these structures were an entirely Persian innovation, or if earlier versions existed in Egypt or even China. But everyone agrees, the yakshal, as it stood in Persia, was the pinnacle of ancient cold storage. You step further in. The floor dips, revealing a cavernous pit where the ice would have been stored. You can still see salt stains along the edges, the faint scent of mineral and straw lingering. Even centuries later, the air in here feels preserved. Fringe accounts say some of these structures could keep ice for months, well into the scorching summer. Others suggest that in the most elite yakshals, servants would chip ice and mix it with fruit syrup to make faluda, an early ancestor of sorbet. Imagine that, you're a Persian noble, reclining on silk pillows, slurping rosewater slush while the desert howls outside. But it wasn't just a noble's delight. Ice was used for medicine, for cooling cisterns, for keeping dairy from souring. In a place where heat dominated every hour of life, ice wasn't just luxury, it was resistance. You run your hand along the curved interior wall. It's coarse and cool. This mud brick, mixed with lime and ash, was designed to resist heat, water, and time. And so far, it's winning. Outside, a man points toward the horizon, where a few other yakshals, the landscape. They look like beehives scattered across the plain. Once, each served a district, a neighborhood, or even a palace. Now, many are silent, but still standing, still casting their long, cool shadows at sunset. And you realize something quietly profound. Where most ancient cultures built monuments to gods, Persia built some of its grandest structures to cold. Not because they worshipped it, but because they needed it. This was devotion in mud and straw. You sit near the entrance, letting the outside warmth brush against your back while your face stays cool inside the dome. It's a strange sensation, one that makes you feel like you're sitting in a memory. A breeze stirs the air, and you swear it smells faintly of snow. The sun slips lower. The yakshal glows gold for a moment, then slowly darkens. You stay there, wrapped in its quiet defiance, a relic of comfort in a world that once knew no wires, no whirring fans. Only the still wisdom of listening to the land and answering it with cool intention. You leave the yakshal behind, the coolness still lingering in your clothes, in your breath, even in your thoughts. The sun is nearly gone now, but there's still light, just enough to wander through the lanes of a small Persian garden as evening rituals begin. The air smells different here, softer, sweet, but not heavy. Someone just passed with a copper bowl, sprinkling rosewater along the edges of the stone paths. You feel a faint mist cling to your cheeks like a whisper. It's not just pleasant, it's purposeful. Tonight, you're exploring the scented world of ancient Persian cooling, the gentler side of the story, where air didn't just move, carried memories. You find yourself in a bog, a traditional Persian garden. But don't think rolling lawns and English roses. Think quadrants of trees, narrow water channels reflecting the last of the sky, and the subtle sound of dripping water echoing under trellised walkways. The four-part division isn't decorative, it's spiritual, symbolic of paradise. But it's also functional. Every canal channels airflow. Every tree is placed to create shade and block dust. You step beneath a pergola where jasmine vines hang low, and your senses are gently hijacked. It's cooler here, but it's also fragrant. That's no accident. Ancient Persians were obsessed with scent, not just as perfume, but as an atmospheric tool. Fragrant plants were chosen not just for beauty, but for their ability to infuse the air that flowed through homes, courtyards, and gathering spaces. A small child runs by, holding a damp cloth. She waves it at you playfully. It smells of orange blossom and something earthy, maybe saffron, maybe musk. Her mother calls from a doorway, reminding her to hang it by the fan. That fan, you realize, is a badger, a windcatcher. And yes, some homes hung perfumed cloths inside them. The air would pass through, pick up the scent, and turn a simple breeze into a balm. You enter a pavilion and sit near a shallow pool. The surface ripples gently. Servants dip sprigs of mint into clay jugs, then wave them slowly in the air. This wasn't random hospitality. It was a form of air conditioning by mood. A mint breeze cooled you and made you feel refreshed. A lavender breeze soothed. Rosewater, well, that was just classy. Historians still argue over whether scent in Persian cooling rituals had formal codification, or if it was more a matter of habit, tradition, and regional flair. What's clear is that for the Persians, coolness was not complete without calm. You couldn't just lower the temperature, you had to elevate the atmosphere. You watch an elder unfurl a cloth and sprinkle it with attar, concentrated floral oil. He drapes it over a lattice window where a small draft slips through. The scent begins to spread slowly. You lean into it, eyes fluttering closed. Fringe notes from medieval travelers describe evenings where courtyards were misted with rosewater before guests arrived. Some reports, possibly exaggerated, possibly not, mention floors being cooled with slabs of stone soaked in iced water and then rubbed with citrus peels for a zing. One guest even wrote that a noblewoman kept lemon blossoms near her fan, so her parrot would smell nice when it flapped its wings. Not practical, perhaps, but undeniably stylish. You notice that the sounds around you have shifted. The market is quieter now. Crickets have started their soft staccato. A fountain somewhere gurgles patiently. You breathe in again. The air tastes like petals. Someone passes with a brass tray holding shallow bowls filled with a frozen dessert, sharbat, crushed ice flavored with syrup, often rose or sour cherry, served just before sleep. You're handed one. It's tart, cold. The perfect punctuation mark to a day spent studying how heat was never simply beaten. It was charmed, tricked, and sweetened into submission. You stretch your legs. Everything about this moment is engineered for peace. Cooling was never just about temperature. It was about easing the body and the mind, slowing you down, preparing you for stillness, sleep. The garden rustles gently. A night breeze glides across your skin, carrying the scent of a place that believed deeply in beauty as function. And right now, your breath is slower. Your heart beats softer. You are, quite literally, cooled from the inside out. You're strolling now slowly, dreamily, through one of Yazd's quieter neighborhoods as the evening deepens into night. The sky above has turned from amber to velvet, and stars wink like gossiping old friends. The air has changed. It's lighter, easier. You're not alone either. The city is alive in that soft, after-dinner hum where everyone finds their way back outside. You pass a hammam, its arched entrance glowing with the warm light of oil lamps. A few men exit, wrapped in clean cotton, steam clinging to their skin like an affectionate ghost. There's laughter and the faint scent of eucalyptus. The bathhouse isn't just for bathing. It's a place of restoration, of cooling down after the daily heat wrestle. And like everything else in Persian society, it too was designed for temperature as much as tranquility. You duck into a covered market, a bazaar. But this late, it's more of a social stroll than a shopping trip. Some shops remain open, their wares lit by flickering lanterns. But most folks are just lingering, talking, sipping tea, cooling off. And here, you begin to see the real genius of Persian comfort, public cooling. At first glance, it doesn't look engineered, but then you notice the alleys are narrow and arched, creating a canyon effect that channels wind. Openings in the ceilings, makarnas, let heat rise while letting in dappled light. Some stalls have small pools or jars of water placed near the threshold. You already know what that means, evaporative tricks to cool the breeze before it enters. Even the layout of the bazaar itself plays a role. Sharp turns and shaded cul-de-sacs slow the sun's reach. The result? A market that feels more like a tunnel of whispering air than a furnace of human bustle. You sit at a low table beside a tea vendor. He hands you a copper cup filled with black tea and a sprig of crushed mint. He fans himself lazily with a palm leaf. Cooler now, he says in a dialect you barely understand, but you get the meaning. His fan isn't for speed, it's for rhythm. One long, steady sweep at a time. Like the breeze itself is being taught how to behave. And it's not just the market or the hammam. You've heard stories of shaded walkways called sabat, ancient Persian sun shelters that lined roads between villages or palace compounds. Small vaults where people, and even animals, could rest in midday shadow. Imagine walking between cities with built-in cooling stations. Now that's hospitality. Historians still argue whether these cooling strategies were formal civic policy or just a culmination of cultural habit. But the result is the same, a landscape shaped by temperature consciousness. A society that didn't just tolerate heat, it designed around it. Even the public mosques often have water features not just for ritual washing, but for cooling the courtyard air. Trees are planted with mathematical spacing, not just for shade, but to control humidity and airflow. Fountains are small but deliberate. You notice one now, bubbling gently beside the tea stall. Children toss pebbles into it, laughing at the splash. One fringe theory you overheard from a local scholar, that public cooling methods were a kind of social glue. By making public spaces bearable, even beautiful, in the hottest months, people stayed together. They talked. They traded. They lived not in isolation, but in shared shade. You lean back, sipping slowly. Around you, everyone is cooling together. That's the phrase that keeps echoing in your mind. No gated villas with exclusive comfort. No air-conditioned elitism. Just cities designed so that everyone could breathe easier. You glance down a narrow alley and see two elders playing a game of backgammon by lantern light. A small boy fans them in turns, likely bribed with a slice of watermelon. You smile. There's something timeless about this scene, something both ancient and utterly current. Your body has adjusted. Your skin no longer itches with sweat. Your breath is long. You're part of a system now, a living architecture of shade, water, and breeze. Cooling the masses, it turns out, isn't about massive infrastructure. It's about clever rhythm. One cup of tea, one shadowed bench, one whispered fountain at a time. You've drifted through shaded alleys, cooled your hands in ancient fountains, and now you're back under the stars, belly full, eyelids heavy. But before you float too far into sleep, there's one last that your mind wants to scratch. Who really invented all this? You find yourself seated beside a young scholar in a modest rooftop garden. He's fidgeting with a stack of parchment notes, cross-referencing ancient maps with what looks suspiciously like a 2015 smartphone. He smiles when you ask about Persian cooling innovations, but there's that look in his eye, the one that says, "Oh, we're going deep now." Everyone wants to give credit. he begins, sipping pomegranate juice with theatrical calm. But history doesn't work like a patent office. And so begins your wander into the spirited, oddly soothing world of historical debate. Let's start with the windcatcher. Persia's claim is strong, especially in Yazd, where thousands still the skyline today. But wait, ancient Egypt had ventilation shafts in their homes too. The Romans had hypocaust systems, yes, primarily for heating, but clever tweaks made them adaptable to summer. Ancient Indian palaces had layered courtyards and water features designed to channel airflow. So, who really got there first? Historians still argue, the scholar says, gesturing with a fig, whether Persia invented windcatchers or just perfected them. He shrugs. I say both. You chew on that thought. Then there's the yakchal. Was it truly the first freezer? Some argue that early Chinese dynasties had insulated ice pits. There's evidence the Greeks used snow-filled cellars. But Persia's innovation wasn't just storing ice. It was doing so at scale in desert cities for months. The yakchal wasn't a clever trick. It was a community resource. Your scholar friend leans forward conspiratorially. Do you know about the Indian stepwells? He asks. Staircases descending into the earth, filled with water and echoing with coolness. You nod slowly, recalling the images, like inverted ziggurats. Same goal, different shape. And that's the theme tonight. Same goals, different shapes. Ancient civilizations all faced heat. They all listened to the land, tested its limits, tried strange things. Persia just happened to lean into it more artistically, maybe even more obsessively. There's a fringe theory that Persian engineers learned some techniques from Babylonian astronomers who tracked wind flow, not just for weather, but for architectural planning. Another posits that ancient Zoroastrian fire temples used specific ventilation to maintain flame stability and temperature control. Did that bleed into residential architecture? No one knows for sure, but isn't it wonderful to imagine? The scholar opens a worn scroll and shows you a sketch, an early schematic of a city quadrant with cooling infrastructure mapped out like a circulatory system. He taps the drawing. This was drawn in the 10th century, not for a palace, for a market square. That's the real mic drop moment. Cooling wasn't just about elite comfort. It was public health, social cohesion, architectural ethics. The idea that comfort could be designed for everyone might be one of Persia's most lasting legacies. You stretch your legs under the table. The breeze is steady now and perfumed from a nearby rose bush. A windcatcher behind you emits a soft hum like a tired sigh. The scholar gathers his papers and begins humming a lullaby. It's rhythmic, repetitive, like the slow pulse of an idea handed down through brick and shadow. In the end, maybe it doesn't matter who first did it. Maybe it matters who did it beautifully, sustainably, generously. And in that sense, you're inclined to hand the crown to ancient Persia. Not because they claimed it, but because they earned it one fan-shaped arch, one clay jug, one chilled breath at a time. You lean back against the low parapet wall, eyelids flickering. The scholar's voice fades behind you as he chats with the breeze. Above you, the stars don't argue. They just twinkle in consensus. You're still on that rooftop. The city below softened into flickering lamplight and quiet footsteps. The scholar has fallen asleep with his papers scattered like leaves. You, on the other hand, are now thinking forward to today, to steel and concrete and humming machine. But let's rewind just slightly to the last hour, the last cool courtyard, the last whisper of air that slid across your arm like a sigh. You're beginning to wonder, what would happen if we listened like the ancients did? You're invited, curiously, wordlessly, into a home that looks new, maybe only a few years old. But as you step inside, you get that same feeling from earlier. The temperature shifts, the air moves. There's no mechanical growl, no vent in the ceiling, no split unit humming like an overworked bee. And yet, it's cool. You've just entered a contemporary Persian eco-home, one designed not in rebellion against modernity, but in gentle partnership with the past. The architect appears, barefoot, calm, holding a cup of chamomile tea. She smiles, opens a sliding clay panel window, and lets the evening breeze pour in like honey. This house, she says, has no air conditioner. She pauses, and it doesn't need one. You walk with her, barefoot across textured stone floors that stay cool thanks to their direct connection to the earth beneath. The walls are thick, of course, mud brick lined with insulated plaster. And yes, there's a windcatcher, a sleek, minimalist one, disguised inside a modern tower, still channeling air like it did in Yazd 900 years ago. But now there's even more, strategically placed solar chimneys that enhance natural airflow, recycled water misting systems, vertical gardens that absorb sunlight while cooling the walls they cling to. You pass through rooms that are arranged not just for style, but for air. One space has a vaulted ceiling. Another, a sunken seating area aligned with the prevailing breeze. Every shape, every angle, every gap has purpose. You see it clearly now. These aren't just nostalgic gestures. They're solutions. Historians might argue over where the old ideas came from, but architects today are busy asking, how do we bring them back? There's a resurgence across Iran and beyond. Designers returning to principles buried under concrete and HVAC units. Passive cooling, thermal mass, cross-ventilation. Water is mood, shade is structure, and not just in luxury eco-resorts, but in schools, libraries, community centers. You visit a school built with local materials, mud brick, straw, lime. Its courtyard is lined with vine. The children nap during the afternoon heat, cooled by natural breezes funneled through quiet ducts lined with clay. No machines, just mud. It works. And in the heart of Tehran, you step into a cafe that's built entirely with reclaimed qanats stone. The barista tells you they don't refrigerate the floor-level storage. It stays cold on its own. He shrugs like it's obvious. There's a poetic justice in it, isn't there? As modern cities roast under climate change, ancient techniques are whispering from below the surface, like qanats re-emerging after drought. Not with pride, but with invitation. One fringe project you hear about, a group of architecture students in California building windcatcher prototypes in the Mojave Desert, using open-source plans from 12th century Persia. They post updates with hashtags like hashtag passive cooling and hashtag windcatcher revival. One caption reads, turns out the future is 2,000 years old. You smile, because maybe the most revolutionary thing we can do isn't to invent something new. Maybe it's to remember, to listen, to return. You sit beneath another modern canopy, not silk this time, but solar mesh fabric that shades and powers. The air moves gently. There's no perfume, but the scent of clay, basil, and possibility lingers. You lean your head back and let the moment settle. It's cool, it's quiet, and somehow it's enough. You've made it full circle. From blazing high sun to this, an ink-soft night draped over the rooftops of Yazd. The windcatchers murmur above you like sleeping giants, and the city's lights have dimmed to dots. It's late. The kind of late where time seems to stretch between heartbeats. You're back on the rooftop where the journey began, the same worn cushion beneath you, the same rough wall at your back. But everything feels different now. Not louder, quieter. Not colder, calmer. And that's when you notice it, the breeze. It curls around your ankles first, low and careful, before slipping along your skin and into your collar. You almost forget it's there until it brushes your cheek like a sleepy hand. It's not strong. It's not dramatic, but it knows what it's doing. Above you, the badgers catch it. You can't see the air move, but you feel it descend, like a blessing that doesn't need a ceremony. You breathe deeper. The night has settled into itself. In the distance, a prayer call echoes faintly. Not urgent, not loud, just a reminder that someone, somewhere, is still awake. Someone tending a jug, adjusting a curtain, maybe telling a bedtime story about the first person who learned to cool water with shade and patience. You trace back through all that you've seen, the mud brick walls that held the heat like secrets, the qanats that whispered under the earth, the domes that cooled without touching the sky, the gardens where scent was strategy, the shade where politics played out silently, one canopy cord at a time. You realize now that Persian air conditioning wasn't just about temperature. It was about rhythm, about designing with time, not against it. It was about knowing that the hottest moments pass, the harshest sun eventually bows, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is sit still and let the wind find you. Historians may debate the credit. Modern engineers may crunch the math, but your body knows. It knows what it feels like to be cooled by earth and air, by water and silence, to be held by architecture that expects you to rest, not just survive. You lie back fully now, your gaze lost in the sky's impossible vastness. The stars are sharp, but kind. The wind has slowed, but not stopped. And all around you, this ancient city breathes with you. Let the last textures of this story melt into comfort. Picture yourself still there on that rooftop, wrapped in light fabric, with the scent of clay and distant citrus in the air. The wind hasn't left. It's only quieter now, barely a hush. But it's there, coasting past the lip of the windcatcher, weaving between thoughts and sighs. The city is asleep. Even the shadows are still. No footsteps echo anymore. Only the breath of the buildings, those wise, warm, thick-walled structures that know how to wait out the heat. And you're part of it. You're not just a visitor. You've stepped into the rhythm, into that gentle understanding that coolness doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to flicker on or beep. Sometimes it's just a thick wall, a damp cloth, a clay jug sitting in the corner. Even now, as your breath slows and your eyelids dip, you might imagine a breeze curling in from the east, soft, scented, familiar. You don't need to move. It'll find you. It always has. So go ahead. Let the story fade now. Let the night cover you like one of those ancient canopies, stitched from silence and shadow. You're safe. You're cool. You're home.